lesson in computer art, and now we are creating an underwater landscape. So to get started on this, we're going to use the same file size that we usually start with. So we're going to create a new blank file that is in inches, a width of 8, and a height of 10, and a resolution of 150, not 715, but 150 should do. And when we're getting started here, the first thing we'll start with is giving our background a gradient. So the gradient that we'll want to choose for this background is going to start with a light blue and then end with a dark blue. So remember, click on the bottom slider to change the color. Let's say this light blue is pretty good. Maybe I'll just make it a little bit lighter, and then a dark blue for this area. And this is a pretty good dark blue. Maybe I'll make it just a tad darker, and then that is good to go. So I'll start by dragging that top to bottom to make a gradient that goes light blue to dark blue, lighter at the top of the ocean, darker in the bottom of the ocean. I think that that's pretty good, although I want it to be a little more even, so with the light and dark. So I just stretched it one more time, maybe one last time, just to make sure I have a good gradient for my background. Okay, next what I will do is create a new layer. On this new layer, I am going to draw a box with my selection marquee tool, make a rectangle, and that rectangle could be right about there. That works. Inside this rectangle, we're going to render some clouds. So we want those clouds to be black and white, so leave this on black and white. If you don't know already, you want to go to default colors. You can click here. That will make your black and white match. So we're going to render clouds. So if we go to filter and then render clouds at the top, we'll get some clouds here. And what we're going to do is take these clouds and actually apply another filter to these clouds. So we're going to go to filter at the top and go to a place we haven't gone to yet in the class, which is called the filter gallery. It's also open on the sidebar over here, so you've seen some of those effects, but we haven't actually used them to date yet. So what we were going to open up is you get a big menu and you're inside a gallery of another workspace. So you can experiment with these different filters and things on top of an image without actually changing them. So down here you can see you can zoom in and out on what you're doing so you can see your whole selection. So I zoomed out just a little bit so I could see it. And I'm going to apply an effect that is in the artistic folder over here. You have some different ones that you can check out and look at, some brushes, some ways to distort things, but we are going to take this plastic wrap effect right here. You can see how it kind of affects by clicking around. It takes a little time to load, but you get some of these different effects that you can do to the clouds, but what we're going to take is plastic wrap because that gives this kind of effect of watery look. And you can play with the sliders here if you want less highlights or more highlights. I want to bring back some of those highlights. I think that this level was pretty good that I had before. Maybe make it a little bit smoother so we get a couple more ripples. That looks good. So I'll take that, and then what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to deselect and I'm going to move it up so it goes off the top edge of my canvas. Maybe about halfway. So that looks pretty good. Next thing I'm going to do is I am going to change the layer style. So I'm going to change the layer style here, and I'm going to go down to what's called linear dodge. And that's going to kind of create this really bright effect, kind of like the light is hitting the top of the water. That's what I'm going for, but I'm going to turn down the opacity a little bit so that it's not so strong. So maybe about 70 to 75-ish. Makes it look like light is hitting the water, but it's not, you know, too bright. Maybe just a little bit further down. Yeah, I think 70 would be good. Okay, so 70 works. I'm also then just going to take my eraser tool and erase the edge of it so it doesn't have this flat line. So again, you want to make sure you choose a brush that has a blurred edge and is pretty big. So I like taking this 300 brush right here. I think that works pretty well. So make sure that you are actually on your little cloud layer here and start really off the edges. See how I'm like really far away from the edge here? I'm kind of just erasing a little bit so that this edge is a little blurred and it blends into the water a little bit better here. And kind of curve the edges too, can create an effect look like we are really underwater. little better perspective if there's a curve. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Next thing that I'm going to do is add a lens flare so that it looks like the sun is up here. So we're going to return to my background layer, and again, we've done this in a couple lessons, is we're going to render a lens flare for the light. So lens flare would be right here. I had already dragged my position of my flare up there, so it's already going to start there. Remember, you can click and drag by clicking on the plus sign to get your lens flare somewhere in particular. Maybe I'll start with this one a little over to the left. It could be anywhere as long as it's up here and it's going to be behind your water. So I'm taking the 105 because I like how it just looks like simple sun. It doesn't have a lot of different rays and things coming off of it. So I'm going to say OK. So now we have a bit of the sun kind of like effect kind of popping through the water there. And now what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to take this layer and flip it so it looks like the ground. So I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to duplicate it, and we could call this floor. And now what I'll do is take this layer and going to move it down a little bit. So this one now I'm going to actually take and flip as well. So we'll go to Image, Rotate, and flip that layer vertically. So we're flipping that layer now, so that is going to be the floor. So I'm going to pull it down all the way so it goes off the bottom edge just a little bit, just like the top does. Okay, and there you go. So that should work for the floor. Again, we are going to mess with the opacity a little bit. So I'm going to just turn this visibility down to maybe like 30, because the bottom of the ocean should be pretty dark. So 30 looks pretty good. 33, I'm pretty happy with that, how that looks. Zoom out just a little bit to kind of get an idea of what the edges look like, and it looks pretty good. I think that this will do for right now. What I'm going to do next and last in this part of the lesson is add some kind of like more sun rays coming through the top of the water. So what I'm going to do again is create a new square and add some clouds to it. So again, I'm going to filter, I'm going to render clouds. Okay, and what I'm going to do with these clouds now is a little different. So I'm going to also go to, I want to make sure I back up for a second and create that on its own layer, because right now it's creating it on this background layer. So this needs to have its own layer, all right? And we can go ahead and render the clouds again in this space. Now what we're going to do is apply a blur to these clouds to make them appear more like light coming through the water. So what we're going to add to it is what's called, go to Filter and Blur, and then go down to what's called a Radial Blur. And this Radial Blur, we want to make sure you have two options. You have Spin and you have Zoom, and we want the zoom effect, although the spin effect does look really cool when I look at it now like that. We're going to go for zoom. What you want to find is the center, so yours will probably be lined up just so it looks like this. So all these lines are going diagonal to the center. We want to make that center to be at the very top wherever your sun is. So my sun is a little bit off to the left, so I'm going to make my center right here just where my lens flare is. So wherever your lens flare is where you want your blur center to be. Good is fine here. Zoom is good. You can make this more extreme if you want to make these lines really extremely diagonal. You can make the blur more extreme. And I'm going to go with a really extreme blur there. Let's say, 95. Let's just see how that goes. So it's going to take a second to process that, and then you can see how we have a bit of, it looks like light coming through those, through the water there. So what we're going to add again is another layer style. We're going to go normal. We're going to go down to color dodge this time instead of linear dodge. So we're going to take color dodge, and you can see how we get that more at that lighting effect. And I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to move it up a little bit. So maybe lines up a little bit better with the top of my water. And then what I'm going to do is just take my eraser. I'm going to take a big brush again, same size that I used earlier, 300, with the airbrush kind of edges, and I'm actually going to start way off to the side, oops, erasing from the long layer. So make sure you're on the blur layer that we just added. I'm just going to kind of take out a little bit of this and make it just a little bit lighter. Actually, that's what I meant to do first, was just to turn down the opacity. So I'm going to turn down the opacity of this to maybe 70. I think 70 is pretty good. Now it's not so strong as it was before. And I'm going to go back to erasing and just kind of erase a little bit of this light from the edges, just to make it a little bit darker down here in this part of the ocean. And see some more of this texture back here that I had of the water up top. So that is about all for this part of the lesson, lesson 1. When we come back, we will add some different things underneath the water here and a few more effects. So I hope you have fun and good luck.